Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I am doing a video on my favourite podcasts, why I love them, what they're about, and basically I have already done this on a blog post, but of course that involves having to go to my blog, and also it kind of changes over time which ones are my favourite and which ones I'm listening to and loving, so this is like an updated version of the blog post. I've kind of split them into three categories, which are educational, conversational, which is like interviews, and also storytelling, which will be kind of, you know, either historical or whatever. Just something that's like a story, so you don't necessarily have to be so kind of tuned in or switched on to be able to enjoy those ones. And there are 10 of them, but of course I do listen to various other podcasts as well, and the ones that I absolutely love and listen to at any one time kind of changes a little bit. Without any further ado, let's get started with the educational ones. As I've said in multiple of my podcasts, I love learning things throughout the day and throughout the year, and just kind of like continuously, hopefully throughout my life, I will be learning various things. I kind of err towards science and that kind of side of things, but I also do like history, and I also like, you know, anything to do with modern day, modern culture, like all that kind of stuff. So number one is You Are Not So Smart. This is an American podcast, and it kind of delves into things that we think we know but don't necessarily know. So the whole premise is that we have these kind of cognitive biases that mean that we think of things in certain ways. So for example, it was talking about why the Democrats and Republicans view the world in such different ways, and what each side values and that kind of stuff. So that's super interesting. It is obviously evidence-based, and it goes into the science behind why we think the way that we think. The next one is No Such Thing as a Fish. This is absolutely hilarious. So this is hosted by the QI Elves. If you've never watched QI, it's like, it was run by Stephen Fry. It's kind of, it's a comedy, but also based on facts. So it's like a quiz show, and the correct answer is not necessarily the first answer that you think of. No Such Thing as a Fish are the people, like I said, the QI Elves, who find the facts for the show, and they've got their own podcast, and it is absolutely hilarious. There's this woman in it called Anna Jasinski, and she just basically takes the piss out of everyone else there. But yeah, so that is a comedy, but it's kind of evidence-based, but like on any topic in the whole wide world. So that one person finds a fact, and then all of the others say facts that are related to that fact. And it's called No Such Thing as a Fish. It's a really, really nerdy reference that probably is quite difficult to get, but fish is like basically not a monophyletic group. So it's, the term fish doesn't really mean anything basically. So like hagfish and a salmon, for example, are further apart in terms of like relatedness than we are from a salmon, for example. So the term fish doesn't really mean anything in that sense. Anyway, very nerdy. They don't really go into that at all, ever. But I just thought I'd explain why it's called such a random name. So the next one is Freakonomics, which is kind of the same. It's Stephen J. Dubner who wrote the book Freakonomics, and it basically, I've got their description of it here. It says, co-author of the Freakonomics books. Each week, Freakonomics Radio tells you things you always thought you knew but didn't, and things you never thought you wanted to know but do. From the economics of sleep to how to become great at just about anything. Dubner speaks with Nobel laureates and provocateurs, intellectuals and entrepreneurs, and various other underachievers. Special features include series like The Secret Life of a CEO, as well as the live game show Tell Me Something I Don't Know. It's really interesting. There's like a different topic each time, and they go into the science or economics and all that kind of stuff of each of those. I used to be totally obsessed with it. I haven't actually listened to it recently, but I have always loved it, and I keep coming back to it, and it's always really good. Okay, so the next topic, kind of group of podcasts, is conversational / interviews. Number one is probably The High-Low podcast, which is run by journalists Pandora Sykes and Dolly Alderton of Everything I Know About Love, which is an amazing book, by the way, if you haven't read it. So they go into the news of the week. It is incredible, like, they're obviously incredibly privileged, and they come at it everything from that point of view, but at the same time they have this amazing, you know, they're obviously very intellectual as well, and they kind of go through the news of the week and talk about it, and also various other funny things. It's kind of like a really funny podcast that also means that you can keep up with the news of the week. The Power Hour, which is by my friend Adrian Herbert at Adrian_London on Instagram. She interviews people who have have done amazing things, basically people who are incredibly inspiring. So one of my favorite recent episodes was with Susie Chan, who is a ultra marathoner and who does things like Marathon de Sable and all that kind of stuff. So those podcasts are all super interesting, and the interviews go into like how they structure their day, what they do in the morning. So the power hour, the premise is that you have an hour at the beginning of the day before the rest of the world wakes up, and you do all your kind of admin in that, and that basically sets you up for the rest of the day. And Adrienne absolutely stands by that. So she wakes up ridiculously early. I honestly don't understand, but that's when she gets all her stuff for the day done. And she talks to other people, entrepreneurs and, you know, business CEOs and all that kind of stuff, about how they run their days and how they got to doing what they do, etc, etc. So yeah, that one's really fun. Next is Happy Place. Happy Place podcast is hosted by Fern Cotton, and she interviews, oh my god, all sorts of people. So like just a couple of the recent ones, she's got Dolly Alderton, who also does the high-low, Mary Berry, James Bay the singer, Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones, Chessie King, fitness blogger, Davina McCall, obviously amazing woman, Bryony Gordon, who did the marathon in her underwear, body positivity, like all that kind of stuff, Natalie Dormer, lots of Game of Thrones people, Russell Brand, honestly the list goes on. She has the most amazing guests and she just talks about everything, literally everything with them, and I absolutely love that. Joe Rogan is my next one. I definitely don't agree with Joe Rogan on everything, but I think that's also really important to listen to people who don't necessarily agree with what you think. And also I love that he's got a long form podcast, so the podcasts are as long as his conversations are, so that is often sort of 2 or 3 hours, and for someone who walks around a lot and listens to a lot of podcasts, that's ideal for me. So I can just literally stick one on at the beginning of a run or something and then still be listening to the same one later that day, so there's like a little bit of continuity rather than having to change a podcast half an hour into a run or like whatever it is. They're really good. He interviews various people and a lot of it's about quite controversial topics, and sometimes, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that I just really disagree with. For example, he's massively pro meat and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time the meat that he buys is all locally sourced or whatever it is, or organic or kind of that kind of stuff. So he clearly has some morals, but yeah, I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but interesting nonetheless, and his conversations are super interesting, and they're not edited in the same way that a lot of other podcasts are. It's just like free form, which I love. Storytelling, This American Life, which is, oh god, I don't even know how to describe it. It's basically, I think they pick a topic each week and then they have various different stories about that topic. So some recent ones, there's one called House on Loon Lake, which is basically this guy finds a house and he finds it when he's younger and it's like totally abandoned, and he's trying to figure out what went on there, and then he keeps revisiting the house as he gets older. So it's basically like an unfolding of the tale of that house and what happened there, and figuring out who lived there and all that kind of stuff. La Donna, a security guard at the airport, notices something going wrong on the tarmac and takes it upon herself to fix it. It's way harder than she expects. It's just like her story as someone who works in that job, and kind of goes into the, you know, her mentality and all that kind of stuff. So that's, I really love this podcast. It's one that you don't necessarily have to be particularly awake to listen to. It can just kind of be a story that you have on in the background, and I really like that. And then similar to that is Invisibilia, which is Hannah Rosen and Lily Spiegel, and they tell stories about why we think the way we do and the things that make us human, you know, kind of our psychology and all that kind of stuff, and stories around that. It's kind of in a similar format to This American Life. Both of them are American, but still incredibly good. I put another one down. It kind of fits into all three categories, so it is educational, it's also an interview, and it's also kind of someone's story. So it is The Life Scientific. If you are interested in any sort of science or just education in general, it's really interesting because it goes into the history of how various scientists got into the position that they're in now, and their life history basically, and also goes into a little bit of the science about what they study. And he has the most amazing scientists on, so if you know anything about science or want to know anything about science, it's a really good way of doing it because it's kind of a story as well as the actual science itself. I love all of these. It's also an amazing excuse to get outside, you know, or like as you're doing the cleaning or something, just stick on a podcast and that keeps you going for the entire time. I really hope you enjoyed that, and I would love to hear your favorite podcasts, anything that you would really recommend that I listen to as well, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.